Good evening. Today is Tuesday, May 5th, 2026, and the Salem-Keizer Public Schools Budget Committee meeting is now called to order. It is now 6:03 p.m., and I will start with the land acknowledgement. We are gathered today on the land of the Kalapuya, who are represented by the Confederated Tribes of the Grand Ronde and the Confederated Tribes of Siletz Indians. The relationship between the Kalapuya people and this land continues unbroken to this day, and we offer gratitude for the land and for the generations present and past who have stewarded the land since time immemorial. We respectfully acknowledge and honor past, present, and future American and Indigenous students and staff of Salem-Keizer Public Schools. We invite you to join us in honoring these ancestral grounds and celebrating the resilience and strength of all American and Indigenous people. And I will now lead us into the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everyone, for being here. It's kind of cozy. It's kind of neat to be able to collaborate with so many, so thank you again. Thanks, Kelly. So first on the agenda today is electing the Budget Committee Chair and Vice Chair.
Chair, can we do attendance first?
Oh, committee attendance, I'm so sorry, yes. Almost skipped that. So I'll go ahead and read each committee member's names for the roll call, and you can say here or not. William Guthridge. Here. Jean Jeton.
Here.
Jean Sunlight.
Yes. Did you say here? Okay, thank you.
Yes, here.
Sorry. Thank you. Good to see you. Catherine Jones.
Here.
Thank you. Armando Muniz. Kelly Strong.
Here.
Ela Thody.
I'm here.
Thank you. Jim Vu.
Here.
Cynthia Richardson.
Here.
Lisa Harnish.
Here.
Thank you. Karina.
Here.
Ortiz. Jennifer Parker.
Here.
Satya Chandragiri.
Yes, Chair.
Chrissy Hudson here. Mel Fuller.
Here.
Oh, wait, there's another page. All right. That's pretty impressive. Everyone is here this year. Good job. All right. So now that we are all here, we can go ahead and start the Budget Committee Chair, Vice Chair election for this year's Budget Committee. So we will now move to the election of the Budget Committee Chair and Vice Chair. Prior to nominations, I would like to remind the committee of the following. All committee members received the voting procedures in an email prior to the start of the meeting. Members also have a copy of their seats, should anyone need to reference them. It takes a vote of 8 to elect a chair or vice chair. A majority of the committee, not a majority of those present, even if there's just one nominee. Nominations do not require a second. We will use a roll call vote process. No other Budget Committee business can take place until the chair and vice chair are elected. I will now open the floor for nominations for the Budget Committee Chair for 2026-27.
Madam Chair.
So I can take nominations of the nominee. What do you want me to do? Oh, yes, go ahead.
Madam Chair,
I would like to nominate Kelly Strawn as the budget chairperson for this committee.
Thank you.
I'd like to make a nomination. I'd like to nominate Chrissy Hudson as chair.
Do we have any other nominations? Anyone? Okay. Thank you, committee, for the nominations. I will now ask the Budget Committee Secretary to take a roll call vote with each committee member stating yes or no. Go ahead.
Thank you. So I will go down the list. I'll call your name. Since we have two nominees, when I call your name, I need you to say who you're voting for. So either nominee Kelly Strawn or Chrissy Hudson. So we'll start with Satya Chandragiri.
Dr. Hudson.
Mel Fuller.
Kelly Strawn.
William Guthridge.
Chrissy Hudson.
Karina Guzman Ortiz.
Kelly Strawn.
Lisa Harnish.
Kelly Strawn.
Chrissy Hudson.
Chrissy?
Jean Jutan.
Kelly Strong.
Catherine Jones.
Chrissy Hudson.
Armando Munoz.
Chrissy Hudson.
Jennifer Parker.
Chrissy Hudson.
Kelly Strawn.
Kelly Strawn.
Isla Thodi.
Chrissy Hudson.
Jim Vu.
Kelly Strawn.
Cynthia Richardson.
Kelly Strawn.
I have a tie, so we will go one more round. Same process. Satya Chandragiri.
Dr. Hudson.
Mel Fuller.
Kelly Strawn.
William Guthridge.
Chrissy Hudson.
Karina Guzman Ortiz.
Kelly Strawn.
Lisa Harnish.
Kelly Strawn.
Chrissy Hudson.
Chrissy?
Jean Jutan.
Kelly Strong.
Catherine Jones.
Director Hudson.
Armando Munoz.
Chrissy Hudson.
Jennifer Parker.
Chrissy Hudson.
Kelly Strawn.
Kelly Strawn.
Isla Thodi.
Chrissy Hudson.
Jim Vu.
Kelly Strawn.
Cynthia Richardson.
Kelly Strawn.
Okay, we're still tied. We have to go until we break the tie, so I will move to round 3. Satya Chandragiri.
Dr. Strawn, please.
Mel Fuller.
Kelly Strawn.
William Guthridge.
Chrissy Hudson.
Karina Guzman Ortiz.
Kelly Strawn.
Lisa Harnish.
Kelly Strawn.
Chrissy Hudson.
Chrissy?
Jean Jutan.
Kelly Strong.
Catherine Jones.
Kelly Strawn.
Armando Munoz.
Chrissy Hudson.
Jennifer Parker.
Chrissy Hudson.
Kelly Strawn.
Kelly Strawn.
Isla Thodi.
Chrissy Hudson.
Jim Vu.
Kelly Strawn.
Cynthia Richardson.
Kelly Strawn.
Looks like Kelly Strawn will be chair, and then we'll move to vice chair.
We don't have any confetti. I'm sorry, Kelly.
I'm glad there's
Thank
no
you.
confetti.
I can bring some.
On the way out.
Do I take over this?
So as the new chair of the Budget Committee, would you like to take over and facilitate the elections for the vice chair position?
Sure.
Or, okay,
Sure,
okay.
yeah.
So I recall in the past, we, I think, had the option to swap chairs or not. Is it mandated?
You don't have to swap chairs,
Thank
but
you.
he will need the script.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm fine right here, if
Okay.
that's okay
I
with you.
think you might need that.
Thanks,
later.
Chrissy.
Yes.
Okay, I know. Well, thank you, everyone. We will now move to the election of the Budget Committee Vice Chair. Same voting procedures and reminders are in place, and I will now open the floor for nominations for the Budget Committee Vice Chair. Lisa?
Yes, I would like to recommend Director Satya Chandagiri.
Other nominations? Seeing no additional nominations, does the candidate win by,
We still have to go through
okay.
the round.
I will now ask the Budget Committee Secretary to take a roll call vote with each committee member stating yes or no, or the name in this case.
Yep, just need a yes or no. Satya Chandagiri.
Yes.
Mel Fuller.
Yes.
William Guthridge.
Yes.
Karina Guzman Ortiz.
Yes.
Lisa Harnish.
Yes.
Chrissy Hudson.
Yes.
Jean Gitan.
Yes.
Catherine Jones. Yes. Armando Munoz.
Yes.
Jennifer Parker.
Yes.
Kelly Strawn.
Yes.
Ella Thody.
Yes.
Jim Vu.
Yes.
And Miss Cynthia Richardson.
Yes.
Okay, Satya is vice chair.
Thank you.
Congratulations, Director Chandragiri.
Thank you very much.
I will now turn it over to Superintendent Castaneda for the Superintendent's 2026-27 budget message.
Thank you, Budget Committee. Just before I even start, I want to thank all of you because every single person on this dais has already spent hours getting ready for tonight. And I know we have several hours yet to go, but this is an important part of our process, and we are very grateful for all the preparation, thought, and care you have already and will soon put into this. I am going to be sharing tonight's budget address with our Chief Financial Officer, Heidi San. And I'm going to start with just a little bit of housekeeping for you all. So you all have a printed budget book. And if you open it up, you'll see in the left pocket, there's a few things that might help this process run even more smoothly for you. So you'll see an agenda. You will also see a protocol document that is a reminder of how we handle questions as they come through. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in our address. You're going to see the calendar that has all of our scheduled future meeting dates. You'll see a printed hard copy of the presentation that CFO San and I will be doing together. And that might be a good one to set aside if you would like to take notes on hard copy, as I know many of you do. You'll see an organizational chart that shows all administrators in line supervision strands. And you'll also see a question and answer document. It's a landscape document that looks like this. And we'll talk about that more in a moment. So this year we've tried to make some changes based on feedback we got from some of you last year. The first is getting access to the budget book in advance of the address. So you all have had it for about a week. The second is that we want to make sure that every budget committee member has equal access to the questions that are asked in any forum and the answers that are provided. And so that's why you'll see the start of this document. You received an email from me and it had a link to a form. It is very helpful if you, A, send your questions in advance. To the degree possible, please do not just walk them into the room because we benefit from a little bit of time to prepare written answers. so that everybody has access to the same answers and information. As we go through the subsequent meetings, we'll just be converting this into a fully updated document that includes any questions submitted in any form along the way. And we will go over these questions after we finish our joint address. So, quick reminder on questions. Our goal is to answer as many as possible tonight. That's why we have these huge tabbed, studied documents. We're usually successful in answering most questions tonight. If you have ones that require additional research, we'll probably ask for more time. And we also may ask to get time with you to make sure we understand the scope of your question accurately before we spend time researching the answer. And then finally, as a reminder, there may be questions that are so comprehensive in nature or so outside the limits of our systems that we refer it to the chair for a vote. We need consensus of the body before we pursue research at that scale. That may also happen for questions that are important but not technically about budget adoption. And I think we've only done that, a handful of times, maybe one or two in the 3 years I've been with you. But that is part of the question and answer protocol. So, moving on to my portion of the budget address, under the leadership of our 7-member board, I do feel so immensely grateful and proud for the hard work of our schools and the progress of our district. I think that a focus on coherence, on clarity, and on consistency of goals is what we're starting to see pay off in our system, with our schools making progress. We've met 3 of our 6 goals for this year and made progress on 4 of them. And while there is much more work to do, that is the beginning. It is the first time that we have gone from a pattern of decline and converted it into a pattern of improvement. It is Staff Appreciation Week, but even if it weren't, I would say that is the hard work of our principals, of our teachers, of our instructional assistants, of every member of our team. And I was recently at an event, and I was with a member of our maintenance team, an electrician. And he was extremely proud that the work that they do on our schools keeps students learning all day. That is what makes this progress possible. Skill and commitment of all of our staff. When I first joined this team, one of the things that I shared as kind of a core belief is that we win when we focus. And we have been focusing on the same 5 goals for the last 2 years. Really 2.5 years. We win when we focus, and we have been very focused. But even as we focus and we win, we are in the midst of what I do believe is going to be a multi-year substantial financial challenge for all Oregon districts. And that is the function of many features: declining enrollment, state revenue not keeping up with district expenses, and other volatility and uncertainty in our fiscal climate and our broader climate. We know that will keep happening. The budget that you have in front of us is our best attempt to convert our goals into a policy document. It is a resource plan, but more than that, it is a policy position on what we believe will maintain and accelerate our progress as a school system. Over the 3 years that I have been part of this district, we've cut almost $100 million from our operating budget. And for a district with our already lean revenue profile, that is a meaningful round of reductions. Tonight, we are going to talk about the fact that over the next year, and I would say likely over multiple years, those reductions will continue. And while we hope that that is actually proven wrong by some dramatic change in Oregon's economy or some dramatic change in the way schools are funded, we need to use this year as yet another year to prepare for the more likely possibility that we are in a period of significant austerity. And when we do that, and what you will see in the budget that CFO San is going to present, it is a combination of new investments and reductions at the same time. That is what makes it a policy document. We could have made these reductions with a straight line cut across everything, and then it wouldn't be a policy document. Then it would be a shaved resource plan. So you'll hear tonight about the ways that we're making some important targeted investments. We're also going to be very frank with you about some of the challenges that are coming. We are presenting a budget with a forecasted $23 million structural gap in our general fund budget. So I'll say that one more time. A forecasted $23 million gap in our general fund budget. It is in rough order of magnitude about what we brought you last year. What makes this different is that you're now seeing the pattern emerge of year-over-year reductions. And every year that we make them, it gets a little bit harder. I think I'm going to pass it over to Heidi in a moment, but I first want to say that despite these challenges, we are not going to stop doing our most important work, and we are not going to stop accelerating our most important services. We will continue doing the work that makes the biggest difference for Salem-Keizer's students. And you can see that we already have the beginnings of that happening. This budget charts a path to more growth with a continued deep focus on elementary literacy, a continued profound focus on safety, and on the overall sense of belonging and well-being of our students. There are new investments in almost all of those areas, even at the same time that we address a little over $23 million in overall reductions. This budget is, I believe, a testament to our values, to the goals set forward by the board, and to the real work that lies before Salem-Keizer. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Heidi. She's going to start with the third quarter financial update for this fiscal year, which is not technically part of a budget address, but sets the foundation for everything that you will hear in the proposed budget. Thank you, Heidi.
Thank you, Superintendent, Chair Strong, Budget Committee members, and Student Advisor. As the Superintendent said, the 26-27 budget will begin where the year we are currently in ends. And so we want to start by providing the Budget Committee with a third quarter financial update on 25-26. So I'm going to walk you through our third quarter fiscal update and the proposed budget, and ask that you please hold your questions until the end. This graph shows the general fund actual financial results for the previous 2 fiscal years, fiscal year 23-24 and 24-25. It shows the forecasted results for the year that we're currently in, fiscal year 25-26, and the forecasted results for the year that we're presenting a proposed budget for, which is the fiscal year 26-27 year. And then we show 1 year beyond that out there in the first year of the next biennium. The orange line shows the actual and forecasted expenses. The blue line shows the actual and forecasted revenues. The black line shows the actual and forecasted ending fund balance, which can be thought of as our reserves or our savings, the amount that we will put away for long-term financial stability to address any unanticipated future financial challenges. The thin blue boxes on this chart indicate a biennium, and inside that second blue box, we can see the forecasted or expected financial results for the general fund in the current biennium. And to the far right, we see the general fund preliminary financial forecast for the first year of the next biennium, the school year that we're the school year after next. The forecast for the next biennium is very preliminary at this point, as there are still many variables that we do not know at this point in time, not the least of which is that we don't know what the school state fund budget will be yet. Our first glimpse of what that will be when we see the governor's recommended budget that is released not until December of the end of this year. And so we have a lot in there in terms of forecast and a lot of variables that are still to play out, but it's our best guess at this point in time. What we do know is that we cannot allow that trajectory of the fund balance and that black line to become a reality, and we won't. Through financial planning and looking forward and reduction plannings that will be necessary for next year, we will work and develop plans that will avoid that will change the course of the trajectory, much as we did for this year. So throughout the winter and spring, we did plan for a $23 million in budget reductions that were intended to mostly close the forecasted gap in fiscal year 26-27. In March, we received initial revenue projections from the Oregon Department of Education for our share of the state school fund, and our revenue projections for the 26-27 year, the year of our proposed budget, dropped about $14 million. For that reason, we know and we have signaled to our community that during the next school year, we will need to plan another round of significant budget reductions. If you can, animation there. So for thank you. For 24-25, we ended with a fund balance in the general fund of $96 million. That's what we brought into the year that we are in right now. The third quarter forecast is based on actual results through the end of March. And if you can just, one more animation, there you go. The actual results through the end of March. And at this point, we are expecting to end the year with $595 million in revenues and $618 in expenses in the general fund. This leaves us with a fund balance of $72 million in the general fund to bring us to our, to bring into our fiscal year 26-27 proposed budget. The projected ending fund balance is about $20 million more than we budgeted in fiscal year 25-26 as part of our adopted budget. And this is primarily due to the fact that we generally, we always have vacancy savings, and departments in school finds ways to spend less than they're budgeted. So we always perform a little better than we expect to. Next slide. This slide just kind of shows the trajectory of how our forecast changes throughout the year as we're looking at it. So it shows the level of summary of our general fund adopted budget for fiscal year 25-26. And then the updated forecast for the next 3 quarters. Budgeted revenues reflect the amount we expect to receive from the state and are based on the best information available. And forecasted revenues change slightly throughout the year based on that updated information. So we think of budgeted expenses as the amount that we can spend based on our adopted budget, and forecasted expenses are the amount we think we will spend based on the most recent information that we have. Budgeted expenses always run higher than forecasted expenses, in part because we fully adopt a budget for every position in the general fund, and it is filled for an entire year. That does not occur in reality, and with over 4,000 employees paid on the general fund and 95% of the general fund single-year revenue devoted to employees' costs, we realize significant vacancy savings there. So, as we went through the fiscal year, in quarter 1, we were forecasting to spend about $20 million less than the budget in the general fund. So by that first quarter, we knew that. And that is why our fund balance is roughly $20 million more that we're going to bring into this year. This included about $18 million in salaries and payroll costs, and then some anticipated costs for supplies, materials, and purchases. In quarter 2, our revenue dropped slightly, $2 million, and we were looking at $20 million less in expenses. And then in quarter 3, our general fund revenue increased back up $2 million as we got some new information from Oregon Department of Education as they are continually reconciling the amount that districts across the state receive. And our projection remained pretty stable at this point. We're pretty stable on what our revenue or expense projections will be. So the takeaway is that what we bring into the budget is based on very conservative numbers. When we start looking at our actual forecasts, what we expect to spend, it looks a little bit better, and that tends to be relatively stable throughout the year. So it changed a little bit, but was relatively stable throughout the fiscal year. So now I want to turn our attention to the fiscal year 26 proposed budget. And I'm going to start with a brief layout of the budget book and then move into a broad overview of the proposed budget. So the introduction section found on pages 4 through 29 provides some important context. We have the superintendent's budget message, which can be found on pages 4 to 10. and that explains the key financial changes, major priorities, and how the budget supports student learning and district goals. We've already shared a little bit about the highlights in that message today, and we'll share some more as we talk about, as we move through our presentation today. I'm not going to walk everybody through every page in this section, but I do want to call attention to a few pages that I think are relevant to the committee's work. On pages 22 through 23, there is a discussion of our general fund revenues, and pages 25 provides a description of all the revenue types that we have. Each fund has its own section of the proposed budget book. Superintendent mentioned the calendar. There's a calendar in there as well. This calendar shows the monthly milestones on the road to adopting a budget that began in January. In the next 2 weeks, we have time to review and approve the budget. We must be able to adopt a budget in June to operate our district and our schools on July 1. So we thank you in advance for all of your work to help make sure that we're able to do that. On page 21 are some notable budget assumptions, and I am certain we're going to find ourselves referencing or referring to those assumptions as we work through the budget together. Okay, so let's begin. So this chart can be found on page 24 of the proposed budget. Our proposed budget, including all district funds, is $1.1 billion. The general fund accounts for just over 60% of the total budget at $676 million, and all other restricted, committed, or assigned resources make up just under 40% at $448 million. Before we pivot to talking about the general fund, I wanted to briefly walk you through the other sources of fund as well. Our special revenue funds account for about 20% of our budget. These funds are described on page 95, and they're restricted, committed, or assigned because they can only be used for purposes specified by the source of funds. For example, in an instance where a fee is charged for a particular program, these revenues must be used to offset the cost of that program. Grant funds are also included in special revenue funds. Debt service fund revenues account for about 10% of the budget. These funds are described on 143, and these must be used to repay the district's PERS pension debt and general obligation debt. The revenues for general obligation bond debt service funds come from property tax revenues that were approved by the voters in November of 2008 and May of 2018. And you can read more about that on page 148. Capital fund revenues account for 4% or $44 million of the overall budget. And these funds are described on page 151 and come from either general fund set-asides, that's money that we have set aside from general fund by the district for multi-year facilities projects or preventative and deferred maintenance, or from voter-approved general obligation bond proceeds. And then finally, internal service funds account for about 5% of the budget, and these funds are described on page 159 and used to account for the services provided by one district department to another. Some examples include district services for charter schools, the print shop, central warehouses, transportation services. Are we on slide 7? This slide shows the major changes in the budgeted resources from 25 to 26, the revised, and shows that we think about the $1.1 billion budget that is for all funds, shows that we have overall from the year we're currently in into our proposed budget about a $44 million decrease in overall funds that are being brought in. Next slide. Okay, so now I'm going to turn our attention to the general fund. The general fund is the district's main operating budget and is an unrestricted fund, meaning we have more discretion over how we use these funds to meet our mission and invest in our strategic plans. We'll spend most of our time with the general funds because it's the largest portion of our budget, 60%, and because the other sources of funds are restricted to specific uses. Information about the proposed general fund budget begins on page 45. The proposed general fund resources of $676 million can be found in that section, and 67% of those general fund budget comes from the state school fund, and another 16% comes from from property taxes. So in Salem-Keizer, our community's real estate taxes only pay for about 1/5 of our general fund revenue. The next largest portion of general fund resources come from our savings. Recall that we expect to bring in $72 million from our fund balance, ending fund balance, into the current year and into the next year, and that's about 11% of our general fund resources. Ideally, we can avoid using any of our savings beyond our 7 to 12% target. That is the ideal situation. That's the situation we want to be in, but a little more about that later. Other sources make up 6% of the proposed general fund budget, or about $40 million, and include things like fees charged on grants, the Common School Fund, state's high-cost disability grant, county and general educational service district funds, and earnings on investments. So, as we talk about the general fund proposed budget, we want to keep in mind 3 main factors that cause significant financial pressures on us for our budget. The first is the portion of general fund dedicated to staffing costs. The second is the rate of staffing cost escalation relative to our revenues, our relatively flat revenues. And the third is declining enrollment, and specifically the fact that Salem-Keizer's share of statewide enrollment is currently dropping. So let's take a look at these one at a time. Salem-Keizer's budgeted staffing costs account for nearly 5% of our single-year revenues. Those are shown on page 91. The major components are salaries and wages at 59% of single-year revenues, or $354 million, and nearly $100 million, or 16%, on retirement contributions, and the remaining 20% are on associated payroll costs such as health benefits, employer-paid taxes. This means that only 5% of single-year revenues are available to be budgeted for other costs and strategic investments without us needing to dip into our savings, which is not financially sustainable beyond a 1-year budget cycle. And we would be more comfortable budgeting staffing costs in the range of 85% of single-year revenue. Prior to receiving our initial revenue projections from Oregon State Department of Education, from the Oregon Department of Education in March, in learning that our projected share of the state school fund had dropped by about $14 million, our planned reduction would have brought us back down into about the 93% range. So we still have work to do to get into that range that we would prefer to be in. But as we make our budget and make our plan, we balance operational needs with the financial needs and try to find the right balance. This graph shows the rate of staffing costs relative to single-year revenues. The red line is the percent of budgeted staffing costs to single-year revenue from fiscal year 2020, 21 through 25-26, and the proposed budget for 26-27. The blue line is the percent of actual staffing costs to single-year revenue from 2021 through 24-25, and the forecasted for 25-26 and 26-27. And so you can see that if you recall, our budgeted staffing costs always run higher than our actual and forecasted expenses because we fully budget for every position in the general fund as if it is filled for an entire year. And in reality, we realize savings. Still, this creates a significant long-term financial risk for us. Unless we see a dramatic increase in funding for K-12 in Oregon, we will continue to struggle in all of our budget cycles to reconcile relatively flat revenue with the growing staffing costs. And finally, enrollment is declining. Nearly 5,000 fewer students are enrolled today than in 2017-18, and K through 12 enrollment, both nationally and in Oregon, is expected to continue to decline, driven by declining birth rates, largely by declining birth rates. Moreover, we are beginning to see Salem-Keizer's share of the state enrollment and therefore our share of the state school fund decline as well. For fiscal year 25-26, our share of the state school funds was 7.26%, and for the fiscal year 26-27 proposed budget year, that share was 7.05%. It's a 0.2% decline. It doesn't sound like a big percentage, but on 6 million in each year's state, 6 billion for each year for the state, it is a big percentage and it causes quite a big swing. With all of that context in mind, let's turn our attention to the details in the general fund. In March, much of 2025-26 was dedicated to engagement and reduction planning, and eventually, resulting in a $23 million proposed reduction package, which was necessary in order to close the gap between our forecasted revenues and expenses. In February, we identified the need to reduce roughly 130 FTE from next year's school budget to help close that gap between our expenses and our revenue. We focused on the central office first, consistent with community feedback, and identified $9 million in central office reductions. Our reduction proposal also included $14 million in school-based staffing, aligned with declining in student enrollment. For licensed staff, we were able to manage the entire reduction in FTE through current and anticipated vacancies and administrative transfers. For classified staff and other non-licensed employee groups, we managed most of the FTE reductions through current and anticipated vacancies and administrative transfers with almost no layoffs. While difficult, these reductions were unavoidable, and we are grateful that through careful planning and partnership with our employee associations, we successfully avoided a reduction in force. In the end of our general fund proposed budget incorporates a reduction of 121 FTE. And these reductions have been brought in to the 26-27 proposed general fund budget. We start next year where we end, and so we are bringing as I mentioned before, we're bringing in the ending fund balance of 72 into our proposed budget for 26-27. I think we need to go back one slide. Maybe not, sorry. This is a 20 million, you can go ahead and go forward, sorry. This is a $20 million more in beginning fund balance than our 25-26 adopted budget anticipated. And why was that? It's because of we always run higher than our forecasted and actual expenses because we budget every position fully, and we budget conservatively, and as a result, we will spend less than we budget. We are budgeting a $4.7 million state school fund increase next year, which is significantly less than we initially planned before we knew about that $14 million drop in March. On page 91, you can find the total salaries and wages and all associated payroll costs in the general fund. Even with a reduction of 121 FTE, our personnel costs are still going up from last year. That's expected. And so for the general fund, we are proposing a budget that has a $35 million gap between anticipated single-year revenues and expenses. So for those keeping score, if we bring 72 million, actually, can we go? I feel like there we go. That's it. For those keeping score, if we bring 72 million from current year as of our general fund beginning fund balance, and we spend 35 more than our anticipated single year revenues for fiscal year 26-27, we have to budget and spend almost half of our savings. So that is a reality in the proposed budget that we are bringing. 17. And this picture shows that. So earlier I shared that our forecasted ending fund balance for Q3 projections showed a fund balance that is expected to be a bit healthier. It was about 49 million. Again, this is because budgeted expenses always run higher than forecasted, and a 49 million forecasted ending fund balance is not at all where we were hoping we would be when we did our reduction planning. Although disappointing, the good news is that through careful and forward-looking financial planning, we have the savings to bridge the gap for next year, but only for 1 year. Relying on those savings to operate is not financially sustainable, and this means it is all but certain that we will need to make another round of significant budget reductions in the 27-28 school year. And we will use a portion of our savings to operate this next year and begin planning reductions for the following year. Can you go back one? Yeah, thanks. Knowing that we are going to use savings to operate in the next school year, we wanted to take a look at the general fund budget and actual reserve targets. So to help protect against uncertainty, our district has a financial target to maintain 7 to 12% of our annual general fund operating revenue. This graph here shows that the budgeted and actual for this year and next forecast reserve balances for the general fund from fiscal year 2021-22 to fiscal year 26-27. And the orange line is the budgeted reserve. So that line on the bottom is the budgeted reserve, and the blue line is the actual or forecasted reserve. Much of 25-26 was dedicated to engagement and reduction planning, and despite the progress that we made to reduce costs in the proposed 26-27 budget, we are presenting a budget below our reserve target of 7 to 12% of annual general operating funds. Our proposed budget for 26-27 comes in at 5.42% of annual general fund operating revenue, and we are forecasting the ending balance to come in at closer to 7.25. So we are budgeting at 5.42, and we anticipate we will operate at about 7.25. Again, we'll need to make another round of budget reductions in the 27-28 school year in order to turn that trajectory around and make sure that we maintain our financial targets. Based on our discussions last year, and in particular the recommendations made by our budget committee member, Jitan, we propose changes to our reserve management process this year. We typically place our savings, those funds that have not been allocated to budget expenses, in our operating contingency account. You can see that on page 89 of the budget book. This year, we are proposing placing 1% in unappropriated ending fund balance, meaning we cannot touch those funds during the next school year except in a declared emergency. The remaining portion we are also still putting into our contingency reserve. And those are funds that we plan and hope not to ever need to use in the next year, but they're funds that are available for us to use if we do need to. The benefit of an unappropriated ending fund balance is that we have a plan for long-term stability, so those become funds as we build those over time. Those become funds that we can set aside to balance the budget in future years. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Superintendent Castaneda.
Thank you. There's just 5 points that Heidi has made that I'm going to foot stomp a little bit before we run through the last few slides here. So the first one, going back to the Q3 information that you saw at the very beginning, one of the things that I want to do now and probably again multiple times is acknowledge and recognize the financial services team. This is over $1 billion budget, and if you did not notice it, what I want you to know is that they forecast expense and revenue on over $1 billion to within a fraction of a percent. There was a $2 million swing over the course of this year. That level of variance actually just demonstrates an enormous amount of accumulated experience and skill and accuracy in the work they do. So to Heidi, but also to all of the team that's watching online, I want to just make sure that you know how very grateful we are. Second foot stomp is we reduced 121 FTE, and even if it's one, it's painful. 121 is loss for our system. And our school community and our schools are working through that process. What I want to say about that is that you heard her say 121 FTE reduction and our personnel expenses still went up. It gives you a sense of the order of magnitude of the increase in personnel costs year over year. Third foot stomp is, it really cannot be said too many times. Having 95% of our gen fund budgeted to people is unsustainable and risky. We have to start working that number down, and it can only happen one of two ways. We're either paying less for people or we're getting more money from the state. And we can only directly control one of those two levers. This is the highest rate I have ever seen in terms of personnel expenses on general fund. And I will hazard a guess to say that this is amongst the highest in the state. While there are many other districts that are in a more immediate and severe financial situation, 95% is risky. Fourth is that our share of the state school fund really matters, and I want to explain why. The state school fund is our biggest single fund, and every year, as you often hear in the news, that fund grows. The state makes it bigger. And when it's allocated out, it's allocated based on your share of the state enrollment. So as the pie gets bigger, if everybody's share of the pie stays exactly the same, then everybody's number gets bigger. But if, as is true for Salem-Keizer for the first time in recent memory, if our size of the pie shrinks, then we are not getting the full benefit of the increase from the state. Only a fraction of a % of a slip there, which is what we experienced this year, can have pretty significant impacts on our bottom line. And then finally, I just want to say that we are bringing a budget in under policy target based on budget. When we think about the forecast, which is how much we think we'll actually spend, we think we'll be grazing the bottom of the policy target at about 7%. But the budgeted amount is less. And that is something that we undertook with enormous caution, and actually, as most of you will remember, worked the entire year to avoid. That happened because of the February update from the Department of Education. It was a $14 million cut that came to us. Well, it wasn't a cut, it was a reduction in anticipated revenue, and it came after this budget was mostly done. 10 million of the 14 was never in our field of visibility. We could not possibly have known it. And so that is the hardship that you're now experiencing as a budget committee, and we are going to experience as a district. It is the volatility so deep into the final stages of budgeting that causes us to bring you a budget that is under policy targets based on budgeted expenses. So, with those kind of additional reinforcements, can you go to the next slide? We are implementing, we're in the first full year of a 2-year strategic plan. You can see on the left there are our district's goals, and then we have a series of 3 priorities with a number of bodies of work underneath. What I'm going to share here is partially in response to Dr. Chandragiri. Over the course of my 3 years with you, I know you've frequently said, show us how our budget is goal and strategy aligned. And I also think Budget Committee Member Jones brought this up last year. So we're going to get in front of this and share a little bit about some of our sustained and expanded investments. Can you go to the next slide? So in the basic priority, which is strengthening foundational systems and conditions, we are investing in a new data platform. Actually, we did training for it this week. It consolidates approximately 10 different data sources for all of our users into one single sign-on dashboard, and will, we believe, dramatically improve the amount of work they have to do to answer any single individual question about, for example, Jackson Woods. So in the future, if you were not graduating, it is a single field into which you search a student that provides you consolidated information about Jackson's attendance and his behavioral needs, about his test scores, about his family contacts, any additional information, one view instead of 10. We are expanding the Training Academy, which has been, I think, the single most important investment we've made to reduce student-caused injuries and start to get a handle on student behaviors. And we are adding additional FTE for custodial and ground services. This is actually the first time that we have chosen to add these, and it is critical. We have very few members of our grounds and maintenance team serving our district, one of the largest real estate holders in the city. And then in continued investments, we are making no reductions to school safety. We are making no changes to our published student to teacher ratio. And I feel especially grateful and proud to be able to share this. This is not true throughout the state. In most of the cases where there are significant staffing reductions, they are changing ratios to account for that. And then finally, just additional improvements to our HR system, because we need our schools to be fully and accurately staffed from at the earliest possible point in the planning process. Next slide. So second priority is improving student agency and wellness. We will be implementing a new social and emotional learning program in elementary. It's been piloted pretty extensively in the district with a lot of success, and continued aligned investments. We are making no material reductions to special education, and we are making no material adjustments to student behaviors. If anything, what we see is the continued expansion of the percentage of our budget that we are investing in those services. And we are sustaining our student attendance campaign. Next slide. And then finally, the most important in many ways of our three priorities, which is elevating academic excellence. This is where we are making our most substantial new investments. And although in a context of diminishing resources, it is hard to say I am proud of new investments, I am going to say I am very proud to bring you a budget that prioritizes this work. We are, to the best of my knowledge, the only district in the state that is reversing the rate of blended elementary classrooms. And we believe that we're going to be able to reduce about half of our blended grade classrooms in elementary. Our Deputy Superintendent Cobb will probably have an opportunity to talk more about that. We're focusing on the near elimination of all kindergarten and first grade blends, which is when very important foundational literacy skills are learned. We have nearly $13 million in curriculum investments, most of which is our new elementary literacy curriculum. And we are continuing to invest and expand in professional development for staff. And then finally, in this area, we also have, besides the overall fact that we're getting smaller as a district, smaller in terms of staff, smaller in terms of student enrollment, and therefore smaller in terms of total sections, we are proposing no systematic reductions in music, career and tech, extracurriculars, clubs, fine arts, or dual language. This is how this becomes a policy document, not just a resourcing plan. So when I started this budget address, I talked about the challenges that we're facing. And as a North Carolina Tar Heels family, I cannot tell you how it pains me to quote a Duke coach, and yet I will do so because there is a very famous women's coach at Duke who gave a preseason talk. I'm sure some of you have seen it. In it, she said, "We all wait in life for things to get easier. We think our own life is going to get easier. We think to ourselves, I've just got to get through this and things will get easier. But in reality, our work doesn't get easier. What actually happens is people get better at handling the hard stuff." And I believe that that is true for Salem-Keizer. It is not that things are getting better because they are getting easier. We are getting better at handling hard things. That's the story of our progress, despite making $100 million in operational reductions over the last 3 years. And while no reduction is good, I will say that we're even getting better at making reductions. The 121 FTE that we had to cut this year, if you ask anyone in schools, they will say it was a dramatically better process than last time. And it's because we are getting better at hard things, and our total and unwavering commitment is to continuing to do that in the future. So it is in that spirit that I'm going to close this budget address, and once again, just say that the progress we're making is exclusively the result of the people who are out in schools and serving students and running departments and making things work every single day. Today, I was at a turnaround luncheon where we honored middle school and high school students from across the district who have made the decision to make a change in their life. And whether you are 14 or whether you are 100, making a change to improve some aspect of your life is one of the hardest things we can do. And I say that partially because I want you to be able to picture the staff that were sitting around our students. Our staff were the people that were there helping those students make those choices. And so every story of progress, whether it's the kind that shows up in our state assessment results or it's each of those students' stories, is the story of our staff. And so this budget attempts to protect all we can to advance our goals and do it under very difficult circumstances. And with that, I am actually going to close the address portion. I'm going to kind of lightly MC, but mostly I am handing it over to Chair Strawn. Thank you.
I don't see clear instructions on how to handle this portion of the,
Oh, can I save you?
please, yeah, yeah.
Because there's
Could you lightly MC for us?
I will lightly MC. There is an element that I forgot. In your binder, you have this document, and this is a new routine for us. So Heidi is going to take us through the questions that were submitted in advance, and then just give you a light voiceover. You have the printed information here. We'll open up every one of these meetings by covering the questions and the answers as they are available. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Okay, good. Okay. We wanted to make sure that we touched base and called out for everyone some of the questions that we received. We thank you and appreciate you for submitting those. So the first question came from Director Fuller, and the question was, is the district looking at cutting the funding for Chariot's Youth Pass buses? The district is entering into an extension of the contract with Chariots to support youth bus fare program in the next fiscal year. That's included in our proposed budget. This is giving us some time to jointly explore that program so that we can think about what the full support is. The non-district funding sources, there are non-district funding sources in addition to the funding sources that we provide. We're actually a fraction of that program. And the Youth Ride Pass program is really important to the service of our students. And so we don't have a desire to see that discontinued. And we've made a commitment to continue on that exploration in this next budget. Committee member Catherine Jones asked about the renovation of the Wells Fargo Call Center building to become a school. And when is that expected, and how will that renovation be funded? So the rough estimate for the renovations of that building is around $95 million. The estimate is in pre-design and programming, so those are very preliminary estimates at this point. And that's anticipated to be funded through a capital bond package, and the timing of that is still dependent upon approval. And then we had another question from Catherine Jones, a list of buildings that will be up for sale for buildings that have been procured in the last year and the upcoming year. So current buildings that are up for sale are Paulus Administrative Complex, Centennial, Lake LaBiche, and Fruitland. A piece of property adjacent to Chavez Elementary School is also for sale. And at this point, we have no anticipated plans for other sale or purchases of other buildings. We have also a question from committee member Catherine Jones, request a list of current contracts and contracts going out for bid. District staff is working with district staff is working on being able to pull that information together, and we're going to connect with committee member Catherine Jones to get additional clarity, just so we can make sure we hone in on the right information. And Committee Member Catherine Jones also requested a list of current administrative positions, and we're working on pulling that together as well. And we want to get a little additional clarity on specifically the background for that, specifically what we want to include in that request. And finally, Committee Member Catherine Jones requests the top 5 changes to state school funding that would make different to Salem-Keizer. This is really a great question, and we think a lot about advocacy and things that we need to do in terms of that. After the system that is currently in place is over 30 years old, and there are a lot of a lot of parts of that distribution formula that are at the end of their useful life. We really, I think, need to look and methodically at researching a new model for distribution formula in the state. There are a lot of different pieces and levers to it, and one approach is to keep looking at each of those levers and tweaking individual levers, and another is to really step back and look at it holistically, and I think that would be the better approach. And so, so those are the questions.
Thank you. Question for the two of you or for Superintendent Castaneda. Would you like to take some time to collect additional questions here? Would you prefer to do that at the next meeting? What's the next procedure? What's the best procedure for us to follow for all of you?
How am I now? Yeah. Our preference is to work through as many questions as we can in the time we have tonight. We're usually successful in answering at least half of them, and then we'll carry out the ones that we were not able to research on the spot.
Okay. Then the floor is open for questions.
Chair, can we take a 5-minute break, like a bio break?
Should we vote on that? No. Let's take a very short break, 5-10 minutes to. Thank you. Yeah. It is currently. Countdown, folks. We're about to get going.
So happy for
Okay, we were never formally adjourned, but we are now not formally re-adjourned. So the floor is open for questions.
I have a question.
Yeah,
How do we ask questions?
just raise your hand and I'll delegate.
I got a whole pile of them here.
Well, how about if we'll try to go one at a time. We'll rotate people. Okay. Go ahead, you can go first.
First question, in the introduction here, it says you're doing speech language pathologists and school psychologists, 45 FTE for the speech language pathology, and 1 FTE per 900 students for school psychologists. So I was just wondering why you're doing those. Shouldn't those be medical?
First, just as a housekeeping matter, it's helpful if you tell everyone the page you're on in the budget book.
It's page 17 in the introduction.
Can you repeat your question about this?
Sure. Why are we doing that? It's got 45 FTE for speech language and 1 FTE per 900. It seems like it'd be a significant savings if the school wasn't doing that. If there's a psychology or a person has a language problem, shouldn't they be directed to medical services instead of the school?
Okay, so I'm going to answer that question. And also, if you will allow me, I just want to also use this opportunity to say, if you have an opportunity, please send questions in advance. That helps us be more prepared. And so as we move into the next meeting, you may read more, hear more, just send them at any point through. Page 17 is actually something that is inserted at in effect, the negotiated request of the licensed association. This is their preferred summary of student to teacher ratios. And the answer to your question, Budget Committee Member Guthridge, is that we are required by law to provide those services.
So I did follow that through, and on page 66, the psychological services were $1.2 million. And then down below it said the speech pathology was 5.6. So it seemed like there was, almost $7 million worth of savings possible there if the school wasn't doing that.
Again, it's required by law.
Catherine?
So I do have a lot of questions, and I kind of have them in my head broken up into two areas. And I think that the bigger problem that we have is just state funding of schools and how it comes down. So I will be digging into this budget. Like you said, there's two problems. It's what's coming in, what's going out. We can only address the what's going out. But I would like us to think about signing a letter as a committee, because if we dip below that 10%, and I want to recall to this same conversation that happened in what, 2023, 4, 3? It's my third year, 3, when we laid off staff, but we held the line on the 10%. And I think we actually, on the ending balance, we held the line. And we justified laying off staff to hold the line on that ending fund balance, which is, the decision that we made. And so now our ending fund balance is severely at risk. And it's not sustainable. And if we go through another wave, it isn't going to hold up anything in the next year. So with that in mind, my first questions, and maybe these are things that can be off your head, or maybe it can't be. In the 2019 session, the Oregon State Legislature made a historic investment into education with the corporate activity tax that came into effect January 1st, 2020. I believe, and I should know this, but I should have Googled better, but it was projected at the time to get about $1 billion in revenue. And that was to be added to school budgets. So when you pull down from the state, but the CAT tax goes into this fund for student success, not the state school fund, from my understanding. I don't know, I know that they keep some in that fund and they issue it out by grants. I don't know if they move any of it into the state school fund that then you draw down. So my question is on, I just have the slides. On your slide 9, where are you pulling in CAT tax? And I do have a follow-up, Callie.
As Heidi finds the page for you for that, which is in the grants portion. So if you, guys, if you look at the tab that says special revenue funds, inside that, so on page 95, you'll see that has separate categories, and one of them is grant funds.
Yeah.
I believe that is where the Student Investment Act is.
Okay.
And you're right, it is separate from the state school fund. It has a separate application process, a separate budget, and has got its own set of restrictions.
Yeah, so you have to, follow up. You have to apply to get access to those CAT funds. They're not coming down into your general fund, is that correct?
They don't come through the general fund. They are allocated by formula, and all districts must apply for their allocation.
Chair, can I?
Director Guzman, were you going to?
So I was going to say, and there was a reduction to that funding in this last legislative session, is that correct?
In the end, they ended up appropriating the anticipated amount with small changes in what are called carve-outs that are outside of the allocation that school districts get. It tended to impact our community-based organizations more because the decision was made to try to preserve the funding that is central for school districts as our second largest revenue source.
Okay.
We'll come back.
Okay.
Director Chandragiri?
Yeah, just, Catherine, you raised the question of CAT tax. We had a student investment account, whole community listening session, and we came up with some priority. The question that I would like to know is there a way to kind of revisit that and see if we can change, kind of redefine the priority, and can some of that money be used for our student goals, like instruction, etc., and that way we can a little bit more, even though it's a restricted fund, could that supplement some of our student goal? Because that time, it's almost like, 4 years since we had the student investment account and we had a whole community listening sessions. The context has changed, the situations have changed. So perhaps that would be one follow-up to what Catherine raised, because we may not have so much wiggle room like the general fund student, but at least if we can define what we can be using it for, which is more aligned with our goal. That's a thought that came to me, and so I just want to raise it. Maybe there's no clear answer now.
No, there's a clear answer now. So it is, we'll get you the exact number, but it is in the area of 85 or 90% budgeted to staff, and the staff are goal aligned there too. We have early literacy support, but especially that is where we are funding a significant portion of our student agency, belonging, wellness, student health programming. And this underscores an overall challenge, which is that although our presentation focused on the general fund because it's our largest fund, our general fund, our Student Investment Act, High School Success, and Title I-A, and IDEA, those are our largest funding sources. Across them, we are still 85, 90% people. So we've been working hard over the last few years to rebalance the portfolio and also make sure it's goal aligned. I believe that we've taken that even further this year, and it is highly goal aligned. I want to add one quick thing to your story about the SIA investment, which was absolutely historic. It's before my time, but I've heard about it. An important thing that falls out of collective memory is that the year that was passed, the state also simultaneously reduced the growth rate of the state school fund down to 3%. In effect, what happened is that SIA went up and the state school fund, in effect, didn't even flatline. It declined compared to actual revenue. So it is only half of the story to tell the story of the increase in funding.
Just real quick, acknowledging that Jean is online. Jean, do you have any questions? Would you like to jump in? Okay, if at any point you'd like to, please just interrupt. Catherine, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, that was my real question. Was if we look back, and I 100% know that education funding is super hard to track in the state of Oregon. But I'm curious is if we look at like what came to us from the state school fund and what came to us from the Student Success Act, if we see an additive response over the years, or if we see that it was kind of taking out some of the general fund from the state general fund that was invested into the district.
If I can restate that as a question, I think that's one we can take back and research.
Okay.
The way we would research it is to compare the biennium over biennium average rate of increase in the state school fund, and then look at that year and calculate the difference. So I believe I was told that year was a 3% increase, and I believe the average has been closer to 9. So that would create a 6% delta in that year compared to average growth rates. And then we would calculate that in terms of dollars, compare it to the SIA historic introduction, and it would give us a fairly reasonable way to answer your question.
Okay, that'd be great.
Questions down here? Jennifer?
Yes, I just had a question about on the last page of the flyer, page 12, where it says expanding the professional development program for instructional staff. And then over the last month, Governor Kotek has been on the news saying she's been going on prohibiting schools and have professional development not to interfere with instructional types. So I just want to have a clarifying question. Is our expanding professional development time not going to interfere with our minimum state requirement of the students' instructional time?
I'm going to kick this off, but then I'm going to probably hand it over to our deputies to correct anything I say wrong or add to it. There is still quite a lot of confusion about the meaning of the executive order. It's getting worked out between the Department of Ed and the governor's office, I think, every day. As we understand it right now, there is nothing in our approved calendar for next year or in our plans that will suggest that we are non-compliant with the executive order, but I want to turn it over to the deputies to add a little more detail.
Yes, that's correct. And we will know more in the fall about specifically how that piece about the professional development days or parent-teacher conferences not counting in your instructional hours, exactly what that will look like. Our calendar for the upcoming school year is compliant with the total number of hours, even with our current parent-teacher conferences and our professional development. The investment you see there is really about how are we using the time that we have and ensuring that we're getting to all of our instructional staff, both teachers and then our instructional classified staff as well, making sure that they're getting the training that they want and need to be able to provide more support to students.
Thank you.
Bill, go ahead.
A question?
Oh, yeah, Jean, please.
Actually, I don't have a question. I have just a comment to make. And Kelly, when you called my name, I tried to connect. For some reason, I was challenged a little bit with technology. What I first like to say is, Heidi, so much. I was really happy when I saw the budget, proposed budget. I appreciate that the budget included unappropriated ending fund balance. On page 8 of the budget, as Heidi mentioned, we have that projected gap of approximately over 20 million. And that is why it's important that we distinguish between this one-time resource and your ongoing revenue. So the unappropriated ending fund balance is what serves as our buffer. And it should not be relied on funding those gaps on an ongoing basis. So I support maintaining it as a protection against volatility while we continue do our job as a committee to align operations with the sustainable revenues. So I just wanted to just make that comment and put it on record.
Thanks, Jean. Bill, go ahead.
Sure. On page 89, let's see, number 6,000, it says contingency for 30 million. Can you remind me what that's for? Or what's that consist of? Page 89.
So
Page
the
89, contingency, 6,000 was the item.
Are you looking at the 29 million on page 89?
29.8, yep.
Yep. Yeah, so that is the operating contingency. When we talk about the portion of our fund balance that we put to the side within those operating targets, and if you take that operating contingency number, which is 29, and then you take the 6.7 million down below, which is that unappropriated reserve, that's the piece that we were just discussing. So that is those two numbers together are the 5.42%. So that is the percent of contingency and savings that we're holding on. And what's different this year is that we've separated them into two buckets. One that is longer term, unappropriated, that we would really be tucking away for long term and that we wouldn't be able to access in this year's budget without some kind of an emergency. The other is our contingency, our savings that we put to the side. And those dollars, we very much hope not to spend, but they are there available. We have not, it's dollars that we have not budgeted out to any cost. We're planning on saving them. There are savings.
Clarifying question? So you're planning on saving it this year in case stuff comes up, and then you'll use it next year if there's any gap? I'm trying to understand.
So it's our savings, it's what we have. And so we when we operate next year in our budget and we do a little better in our budget, hopefully, than we're planning, we will determine what amount we can carry into the next year. So we don't plan to use it. We don't plan to spend it. It's the savings that we have, but we can access it if we need to.
Anyone who hasn't asked yet, should we? Nope. Director Chandragiri?
Yeah, I think I just want to visit the end fund balance. I know we are making a statement that we will work and get it up. With $2 million, that won't meet more than half a week's salary in the worst case scenario. And it is going to have impact on several areas, including our bond rating, debt repayment capacity, et cetera, et cetera. So if I kind of just ask a question, if we were to, like last time, I think when we had the budget meeting, we decided to ask, okay, how many of you, there like some kind of informal vote we had about protecting the end fund balance, or should we not have a thing? Do you think it will be helpful if this time the budget committee brings a motion and has a clear vote, an action item which says we protect a percentage of the end fund balance as a buffer, which will not be touched unless a declared emergency? I think Jean Jetan had raised that concept, if I remember right. I would like to revisit that because this is not healthy with $2 million. And first of all, even if you assume there is going to be no crisis, that's like taking a big risk in such a big organization. And I know our budget team is excellent in predicting up to the $1 million, but God forbid some shift happens in the supply chain or who knows what. So that's one such thought I'm having. What if we take our district policy and say we need 7 to 12% and we start with that as a fixed point, and then can we rethink the rest of the spending so that we will continue to at least project what the budget would look like if we fixed that as a starting point rather than saying, hoping for some miracle that we'll have the extra fund in the state. Because the reason is we're going to be competing with healthcare sector. We're going to be competing with so many other sectors. And pretty much everybody is going through similar scenario. I might as well take today's presentation and just put hospitals or CCOs on that. It will look the same. You can take the same thing with other social services. So in this climate, because it's a budget, and if we suddenly get lots of money, then we can always have a newly, supplemental budget and fill in any bucket. But what if we decide to start with 7 to 12% end fund balance and then work our budget through?
Do you want to answer that or hear from Jean first?
I'm actually going to clarify a portion of it and then kick it right back over to Jean, as she is, you'll recall, Committee Member Jetan was the originator of the unappropriated end balance conversation. I want to clarify, we are not proposing reserves of $2 million. And I'd like to ask you guys to turn to page 9 in your budget book, where you'll see a graph that is now pretty familiar to most of you. Dr. Chandragiri, we wholly and utterly agree with your points about the importance of a reserve. And I just want to show you this. This is, if you look at the forecast that ends in 27, so the 26-27, the second of the 3 points. Based on our best attempts to forecast expenses, which we have been reliably accurate at, we're anticipating a $49 million ending fund balance next year. So you can think of that in effect as $49 million in reserves, not 2. Okay. But what we've done in response to Committee Member Jetan's, we thought, very smart suggestion, was take that 49 and carve out a portion of it that has to be protected. And at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Committee Member Jatan, who's the right person to talk about why an unappropriated ending fund balance is important.
Kelly,
Yes, go ahead.
All right. So I just want to begin by, there was a term that was used about something to do with policy. And I just want to do a little reminder under the local budget law, under the statute, Oregon Revised Statute 294.456. As the budget committee members, we can revise, approve the proposed budget. We have the authority to adjust those appropriations, but we do not set any type of policy. That's not within our authority. But with that said, I believe Satya mentioned unappropriated fund balance is a cushion. It's important that we keep that ending fund balance in place, even though Heidi presented it in the budget very small, but it's one of those tools that we have to absorb for unexpected changes. So think of the unappropriated ending fund balance as your protection. We have also what's called the contingency that you see in the general fund. And that's your flexibility where it strengthens the reserves, meaning, let's say during the school year, if there were any type of situations costs that need to be addressed, that's where the contingency comes in. So that's what we do with the reserves. They're not additional money. Those are just these tools that it's not ongoing expense, but is to take care of those long-term and address those gaps that Heidi showed us on page 9.
Can I ask just a clarification on this? So that unappropriated ending balance has been put there by a vote of the board, correct? So who then decides what the emergency is that makes it accessible?
Board.
May I answer?
Yeah, Jean, go ahead, please.
Under the local budget law, the line items for the unappropriated ending fund balance are monies that are not used, plans that are not used during the fiscal year. They're actually monies that it's supposed to be for the revenues that come in for the following fiscal year that cover those expenses before those revenues starts coming in. Does that make sense? That's the idea behind what an unappropriated ending fund balance is. Now, let's say you asked if our district needed the money or there was an emergency. The unappropriated ending fund balance is not a line item that can be used in the current fiscal year. The only time to use that line item if it's a emergency situation like the governor when we had COVID, for instance. But unappropriated ending fund balance under local budget law, it is supposed to cover those expenses following the fiscal year before those revenues come in. The contingency line item is money that can be spent during the fiscal year. However, we kind of use it as if we're not sure exactly the flexibility and how we want to spend it, we wait and see throughout the fiscal year if that is the monies that we need to use. Does that answer the question? Does that make it clear?
Do you all need to respond? Are we good?
Only to say that when we meet with Committee Member Jatan, mostly she teaches us things.
Just a
thanks, Jean.
follow-up question to
Go ahead, yes.
Jatan. This year we may have 49 end fund balance and we may leave, but think of the cliff that it's going to lead to. So the reason I brought up this question is not this year it will be $2 million, it's that the next biennium, we don't know, we may have plenty of money, that's all right. The state may give us more, become suddenly generous or whatever it is. But it's from a school business, you have to think of long-term. You can't just think of today. It's a long-term business. So we have to really be not just fiscally responsible what we do today, but also to make sure in the next biennium, the end fund balance or starting fund balance is such that before the checks start coming in, they send us money 11 times a year. Just like this time, we were surprised that 14 million. Actually, they use some formula to calculate they always use that formula to calculate. But you know how so many variables happen, and we may not agree with the formula, but that's what they're using. So it's like we are asking them to change the goalpost, which is fair. I'm not sure we can move that part of the machinery as fast as possible. So I was just thinking if that in the next biennium, if our starting fund balance or end of this biennium, what we leave behind, if it is in that range, 7 to 12%, even if it is 7%, what would that mean this year that we have to do, or it's going to be in the form of vacancy savings or some kind of clarity so we are not leaving such an anxious system behind? That's my question.
Can I restate your question and make sure I understand
Please,
it?
please, please.
I think you're asking what kind of actions in terms of financial management and controls need to happen over the course of the 26-27 year to ensure, or as close as possible to ensure, that we close next year inside of policy targets.
Correct.
While we can't guarantee things right now, our assumptions around underspend and vacancies strongly suggest to us that we are going to be at the very bottom of 7%. That will happen through careful management, but also just the way that we practice business. It won't require additional reductions. However, the next biennium and the 27-28 year is the year we also should have our eye on. That will mean that next year we will also be, in all likelihood, planning another round of significant reductions on the order of the size that we saw this year in order to not let 28 look like the third point on the graph that you see on page number 9, which we cannot let that happen.
No.
Director Hudson?
Thank you. Just clarifying question. I didn't hear the answer. The contingency line item, who actually chooses to move that money? So during COVID, some probably remember there were many board meetings and maybe the board, but not always. So I'm wondering if, say, if you can answer that question just as is, I'll stop talking. But if you need more clarification, then I'll give you an example. So, like, go ahead.
I'll restate, make sure I understand. So you guys are looking at a proposed budget that has the contingency line that we looked at a moment ago. I don't remember the page number anymore. I think you're asking, where does the authority come from to either save that savings or spend that savings?
At the moment of time that catastrophe strikes.
Catastrophe changes the question a little bit because a catastrophe is technically what would allow us to tap the unappropriated ending fund balance and to catastrophe for next year. But the contingency is part of our budget, and so we have the authority based on this approval that you will eventually offer to spend up to the appropriation limits. Anything beyond the appropriation limits, we have to come back to you for a supplemental budget. I wasn't here for COVID, but my guess is that they ran multiple supplemental budgets during COVID.
Okay, so unappropriated, same thing, right? No?
Unappropriated ending fund balance would require, it has actually very dramatic legal language. It's like civil unrest, act of God, something like that. Yes, committee member Jitan will actually do this right because she is a professor of this content.
Kelly, is that okay?
Yeah, please, Jean, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Just to answer the question, so under local budget law, there are 2 line items, and it gets confused quite a bit, is contingency line item and the unappropriate ending fund balance. When you have a contingency line item, that means the district can spend, they have plans to spend that money during the fiscal year, but they're really not sure, or they want to have that little reserves just in case if something comes up, but they're not really sure, they have this contingency line item. The question was asked, well, who makes the decision to use that money? Well, usually if the district wants to use the contingency line item, a resolution needs to be passed and that is done at the school board. Okay, so the school board members. And that can be done throughout the year. And then you have to pass a resolution explaining the need and the purpose and the dollar amount. So that's how a contingency line item works. Unappropriate ending fund balance is money, think of it as those are monies that are used for the following fiscal year. It is not for the current fiscal year. So it's not money that you can spend for 26, 27, that's our proposed budget. It is money that will be, the idea behind that is to cover 27, 28 expenses before those revenues come in. Okay, so unappropriate ending fund balance, think of it as you will not be, the district cannot spend that money. Does that answer the question? Does that make it a little bit clear?
I think everyone, yes, because the board, either way, basically the answer is, sounds like.
To pass, to use the money for the contingent, it goes through the board, that is correct.
Chair, do you need a motion to fix that unincorporated end fund balance? Because that's what I understand before we kind of, as a way to protect 27, 28, so that we'll not end up spending that money this time. That's a question I wanted to raise.
My understanding is that this is not actually being proposed to be spent. Is that correct? Like it is, so then I don't, then the motion.
No, it's not a motion. I'm just asking, is that something that we need to fix that? Based on that, we can decide how much to spend this year or?
Under local budget, sorry, Kelly.
No, please, Jean, go ahead, yeah.
Under local budget law, that line item indicates that. You do not spend it during the fiscal year.
I agree.
Yeah.
If I could also clarify in furtherance of your point, Dr. Chandragiri, we are bringing you a proposal that for the first time already has that in it. Okay. So when or if you approve this budget with that in it, in effect, everything you're asking for is already part of the package.
That will do. Yeah.
Thank you. Are there other questions this evening? Bill?
Could you clarify again, that contingency, that's part of the budget for what? For savings for next year?
Kelly, can I answer that? Or is that fine? Or
Superintendent, would you like Jean to answer that?
I think the way that I have come to understand this, which doesn't have all the technicalities that Committee Member Jitan is explaining, but is directionally accurate, is that the contingency is incorporated into what we call our reserves. So you'll hear us talk about our reserves frequently. Reserve is kind of a generic term that lumps together a number of different things, and in this case, it's contingency and unappropriated ending fund balance. So the answer to your question is that we do our best to not touch it and to, in fact, grow it through vacancy savings and underspend throughout the year. That is especially true in a year like the one that is coming, and where we know for sure that every dollar that we can keep in our reserves helps stabilize our financial health for the following year.
Jean, do you need to follow up on
that? No, I just wanted to mention that I would want to more recommend on adjusting appropriations to align more on those ongoing revenue. And we want to think of it about maybe not avoid relying on reserves, like a contingency, for instance, to balance future years. So that's kind of like the thinking process when we think about the reserves, like the contingency line item and the unappropriate ending fund balance.
And that is exactly why we did $23 million in reductions, because it would have closed our structural gap, and it meant we would have hardly or maybe not at all had to touch the reserves. And this just shows, I think, our alignment in thinking and practice with what Dr. Chandragiri, Committee Member Jatan, and possibly also Committee Member Guthridge is saying about the importance of maintaining those as we move into even more financial austerity.
Jim Vu.
So completely change gears. I'm going to reference back to the introduction slide, number 11 of the 2026 Focus on General Funds. Something I heard in the beginning was looking at percentage. So get on that page. It's the red Pac-Man with a gray mouth. So in that budget, looking at the staffing costs was at 94%. Looking at the general funds, Superintendent, you had stated that that is high across the board and standards. In terms of goals and what good looks like, what is a reasonable percentage of staffing costs of general budget?
For Oregon, I would love to see us at 85.
Okay.
A little bit in a different direction also, but thinking about student enrollment, the Q3 report that we recently received states that there was enrollment decline of 450 or 451 students in Q3. Is that correct? Did I understand that correct? Or before I continue?
This is a great question. What you're hearing us is us talk about the fact that that's the one document we didn't print. So I think if you actually can continue with your question,
Yeah.
and we'll pull that up in the background.
Yeah, it says the March 2026 enrollment is 36,433 students, down by 451 from last quarter. And my question kind of, and maybe this is for next meeting, is around, is that within the range of enrollment decline that we are expecting, or is that higher? Because that seems like a significant number to me in a single quarter. And so following that is then the question of our enrollment and general fund allocation, like our projections, what are we basing those off of? And what is the pattern that we are seeing right now?
I'm going to open up this question. This is as big of a can of worms as contingency and unappropriated ending fund balance, but also just as important. I'll open it up, and then I'm going to hand it over to some combination of Paul or Jonathan. I'm not sure. They'll jump in. So the first question is that within the range of normal? We are in a 2-year period where our losses are higher than anticipated. They now fit within our forecasting model, so we can see what's happening. But I believe that we are on track to drop enrollment by around somewhere between 1,100 and 1,200 students this year. And that loss does spread throughout the school year. Whether that is inside of normal or not, we might have to research for you. We are very fortunate right now to have updated 10-year forecasting that's highly detailed. It's done by a professional demographics team. This is not something school districts can do on their own. It takes into consideration housing starts. It takes into consideration long-term birth rate patterns, kindergarten capture rates. There's a lot of inputs that they consider. And it is using that updated 10-year forecast information combined with our own validating data that we do the forecasting that ends up being part of nearly every multi-year graph we show you. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to whomever is catching us.
I'll take it. I'd say across the year, our enrollment always drops. That trend is close to normal of what we see. I'm trying to pull up our forecast for next fall, but it doesn't, what we're seeing in this year from quarter to quarter is not driving us to think our forecast is off for next year of what we're looking at for enrollment.
Other questions? Catherine?
So just to close the loop on, again, I think that the biggest issue definitely is how the state funds schools. And so if we can get a list of, and I think it'd be worth this committee considering signing a recommendation of what the state needs to do to kind of help Salem-Keizer out. I think we are weathering the storm a lot better than other districts. And I think that is because we have protected the reserve balance and we have made, you know, I think that we're weathering it better. But I think that their storm is looming and it's coming, and with our reserves lower, I think it definitely is worth looking how Oregon funds its schools. And so I would like to kind of put that forth of us signing something, not only passing a budget, but also I don't want to leave the committee with this storm out there.
Could I interrupt you for just 1 second?
Yeah.
It sounds to me like, I think there's a procedural question there, which is, does this particular committee even have the authority to do that? Is it just a friendly request? Is it a request that goes to the board itself? Like, and do you have an answer to that? Do you and the team have an answer to that now, or is that to be postponed for next week?
I think I would love to bring that into next week's answers. The procedural question is real, but also the potentially unified show of support and solidarity around this very important statewide matter is an important one.
Right. Okay. Go ahead.
Okay. Now to what we can control. So you know that I scraped that general fund. And that was during the budget committee, and then also, and I don't mind seeing the majority of our budget going to staff. I don't. I know that staff increases PERS is a huge expense. So I'm always looking for general fund that I can tap that doesn't hit the classroom. And why I didn't pay attention to this in the last 2 budget cycles is because it was under restricted. And so I just want to make sure that what we're spending on facilities, and that's why I was asking about the Wells Fargo Center, is I didn't catch it last time, and I was like, why? How did I miss that? And I think, so the Wells Fargo Center is coming, I know it came from the state student success, or the school fund, and it went into our general fund, and then we passed that budget in May, and then in June, we moved general fund over to purchase that Wells Fargo Center. And so did that fall out of Fund 418?
I first want to just say, I right now off the top of my head cannot confirm all of the timeline details. You may well be right. I just don't remember all of the different moments that those things happened. But we move it from a general fund into 418. So when you said did it fall out of 418, I don't think I knew exactly what that meant.
Yeah, it's a transfer in. It looks like of resources 5,200. So that when I look at how much of this general fund on you know, because with the presentation we went through, okay, we got general fund and we got restricted. When I look at this 418, is it coming out of, in that slide, and those dollars coming out of the general fund, or are they restricted on slide 6?
So I'm going to back up just a little bit and talk a little bit about the timeline, just for clarity's sake, and then come back around to that question. So the transfer out of the general fund into, yes, it was general fund 418, or into fund 418, and it was a $15.5 million transfer. The timing of that was that actually came from the 24-25 budget. So there was a 24-25 budget, there was a supplemental that was done, and then that happened. So it wasn't a part of last year's budget.
So there was $7 million that came out of the budget, right, and 7.5 in the supplemental, that, right?
There was 15.5 was the total gen fund transfer to the supplement from the general fund to 418. So I'm not sure. So what the 7.5 is. So let me look at that.
And then you got more money from ODE. Is that where the remainder of that 15 point? Sorry.
I think since we're talking about budgets that have past. I think we'll be able to better answer your questions if we let you take this a little bit further into the present, and then we'll understand where you're headed and can talk about this proposed budget.
Yeah, so where I'm headed is, that's a lot of money. It's an asset that we have. It's an expensive asset we have. And to get it up and running is 95 million. And a bond that, and this is a bond that we haven't passed, that we haven't taken to voters, right? This isn't coming out of what was passed for Salem-Keizer in 2022?
I think 18.
18, okay. So this is a new bond, is that correct, for that 95? Okay, I just want to clarify all that.
Thank you. Others?
I just want a clarifying thing following this question. When we move funds from one bucket to another bucket, there is a district policy, if I remember right. You have to kind of make good, when you're eventually, you have to kind of put it back in the original bucket. Is that right? There's a between funds transfer, there is some policy on that. I was kind of, I reviewed it long ago. So just like we moved from general fund bucket to, because at that time, the board had to come up with a supplemental budget and approve it because we had to buy the property. There was a timeline where the seller or somebody had made an offer and we had to come to it. So I think that is the thinking behind, if I remember right. But we do have a district policy which says we'll make good from if you do take money from one bucket or one type of fund to another one. Maybe I'm wrong, but there is a policy around that. If you see the district financial thing, I forget the number. So that's my recollection. And this was a good property. As a board, we had supported this. And I believe we passed a supplemental budget, but then we had to do it. We had some unspent money from the prior year, which we used towards this, if I remember right. That's my recollection.
Yes, everything you just said is correct. The only slight edit I would make is that if, I'm not familiar with the requirement that we have to pay it back. The best practice is for significant things like a building purchase. Exactly what we did is that it comes back to the board for a resolution through a supplemental budget, which is what happened with this building purchase.
You might be
Oh, go ahead, Chrissy. No, please.
thinking about the conversation when they said, hey, this property came on the market, it's a good deal. If we flipped it, like just sold it, we would make a profit off of it if something went south. And also, we're gonna sell these other properties that otherwise need all these repairs that are gonna cost the district a lot more money than buying this property and doing this to refurbish and make legal standard for the students is what I think we were.
Yeah, and then you had suggested that will it go back to the original fund from where we took the money to thing? That was your question in that discussion, if I remember right.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just wanted to kind of bring that clarity the way I understood. So it was the board's decision to pass a supplemental budget. We had to do it because the property would have not waited for us.
Are there other, we've been at this for a while, we could go a little while longer. Are there other questions
Yeah, I have
in preparation for next week? But let me just sort of survey the team here. Well, Jackson, do you have anything? I'm just going to kind of go down the line here and see, make sure everybody's had a chance. No? Mel?
I'm just listening.
Okay. Karina?
Thank you.
Armando? Okay. Dr. Chandragiri or Bill, I can't remember who was going next.
Yeah.
Bill, oh,
Okay, so you want to go to Jennifer?
let's go with Bill and then we'll come back to you. Go ahead.
Back on page 67, the speech and pathology services, and then the psychology services, you said that's required by law. I'd just like to know more about that. Can you give me the ORS or something? You don't have to do it today or right now, but I just want to know more about that so I can follow up. Thank you.
Those are just some of a pretty large array of services that are required under mostly federal special education law. If a student comes to us and he or she needs speech language services, he or she may very likely end up with a specialized service plan that is also legally binding. And inside of that, it will say this student needs a certain number of minutes per week of speech-language pathology services. So it's not as much an ORS as it is a federal requirement.
Mel, go ahead.
Yeah, Bill, I think maybe I can put this into context a little bit in day-to-day school stuff. My son was in special education and had an IEP for reading, and one of the things that helped him overcome that was he had a speech impediment. And so when he couldn't have the sounds in his head for the sound of the word come out of his mouth the same way, that speech pathologist and speech therapy helped push those two things together so that he could read.
Got it. And then the other thing that just mentioned here is psychological services. So is that required as well?
Yes, and I'll just tee it up a little bit, and then I'm going to hand it over to Deputy Superintendent Cobb. There are actually a very large range. There's physical therapy, like OT-PT services that are required under an IEP or sometimes a 504 plan, and many, many other services. These are exactly the kinds of services that help our students close gaps, gain skills, catch up, and accelerate. And I will also add that these are the kinds of services that have never been fully funded through federal funding nor through state funding, where there are significant revenue caps. Just as a matter of clarification, the state caps special education at 11%. Most districts are running north of 16%. So you can see how large the gap is between what we are compensated for and what we are legally required to provide. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Deputy Superintendent Cobb.
I will only add one thing specifically to school psychologists. They are a critical partner in doing the evaluation process for a student who is in the process of eligibility for special education. And so they do a lot of testing that needs to happen for the team to come together with the parent and then talk about all the needs that the student is showing, and then together the team develops a plan and the school psychologist is at the table while that happens.
Seems like a great area where you're being asked to do something and you're not being funded for it.
Yeah.
25?
Go ahead, Jean.
It was not me.
Oh, sorry. Very quickly, I'm stepping slightly out of my lane here, but there's also a ton of evidence that shows that early intervention of this type is actually good education. It saves a ton of money down the line. So investing in kids early in these things is actually part of education that saves a lot of money. So I think it's a great question. I'm not arguing the question. It's just that we tend to forget that that kind of service is as essential to education. We know this now, education, learning, thriving later on as actual classroom instruction. So do you want to follow up, Bill? Sorry.
Oh, I was just
Anyone
saying, if only included more dyslexia too. Been on this committee for 3 years, tried, failed on dyslexia funding.
Jim, Jim, go ahead. Jim Vu.
Jim, you're going to ask some question? Yeah.
Yes, please. In terms of, say, those services, are there, federal and medical funding sources that if this district is providing these services and not getting, funded behind it, are there programs where we could bill out for it?
Yes, and Dr. Chandra Giri is certainly our new resident expert in this topic. Some services provided by schools are clearly Medicaid eligible, some through kind of special arrangements with the state as a pilot site are eligible. In general, right now, we do actually seek Medicaid reimbursement for some services. Deputy Superintendent Cobb could say more about that, but we mostly focus on, not on educational services, but on nursing and medical-related services, which are very squarely within Medicaid reimbursement eligibility guidelines. And there are very few state districts in Oregon who have figured out how to dramatically expand that, although it is the topic of great interest and discussion amongst, I think, both policymakers and districts.
Can I follow up on that? Is the juice worth a squeeze for it?
Yeah.
Right now, we see that we're getting great return for the services that are provided by our nurses for students who are medically fragile and require a person with them all day long. We also provide some services that are home services to some students that are usually homebound. They receive homebound instruction. And then there's a little bit of funding that comes back to us for social workers, but we haven't really dug into that because there's a lot of entering of data on the social workers. And so we're still exploring, and for now, we are really taking advantage of the benefits through the nursing and then some of the social work that we do.
Yeah.
I'm not sure the juice is worth the squeeze right now to try to expand dramatically as there's so much uncertainty in the broader Medicaid eligibility world.
Director Hudson?
Thanks. You remember your question? Okay. Because mine might be, yours is on topic still, right? And mine's kind of pivoting out of it, but same.
Do you want to go here?
If you do.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
You know, I think notice that we have 19% of children on special education. It's like, 11% is where the state, it's like a jungle juice. In the college we used to have different liquor, you mix in a bucket and then you distribute it. So a lot of times we end up cost shifting, We still have to take care of the 19% of kids, but only 11% get paid. So literally you mix all this pool of money in one bucket and then dish out to everybody like what we did in college. I think this is the structural thing which takes back to Catherine, you suggested. I agree with you and I will wholeheartedly support, not only we are parents and citizens, but we as a body are very powerful. We are a public body. And we have to sometimes speak out. Otherwise, what happens is from 1995 onwards, the same weightage has been going on. We just discovered that the SAPE, one other method they use for poverty weightage, doesn't really cut the mustard because a lot of children living in poverty or poverty-dense area are overlooked. And poverty density is by itself a huge variable through which a lot of other intersectionality of other problems. So that's one thing. And the second thing is after COVID, we are still using the pre-COVID kind of way of looking at the system, but a lot of things have changed. The mental health challenges have changed, behavioral problems have changed, so many things. Like Bill, you raised a good question. To me, this ratio is not enough. It's like too many kids for one psychologist or one social worker. So there are structural challenges. And I think if we don't speak up, how does the state know these are the local issues, right? They'll be, every year, everybody is in a hurry to simply rubber stamp the same budget, current service level. But we are not able to understand that the whole system has completely changed, and we haven't done a proper costing of what it costs to educate a child. All those things are beginning to show here. What we are seeing in the last 3 times with the RIF we had to go through are nothing but the policies have impact one way or other. So, but the policies or funding decision is a type of policy decision. So I think it's time to speak up and say what kind of changes in policy which will lead to not having to go through these kind of painful process. I mean, there's only so much you can do squeezing the, whatever you said, juice. Nothing will come out in the end. It's like, So,
Can I interject?
So I'm really asking that as a budget committee, I like your idea of coming up with things and then include all the areas where we think that could have added, not just the 5 questions that you asked.
Okay. I would propose that we have one more question, and then if there are other questions, that we send these in via the process of written questions, and we can get answers to them next week as well. But Director Hudson, go ahead.
So this may be part of it. Just a little more clarification again on the psych services, so that we as a whole, as a community, as a state, can put more focus on, with our legislators, whomever, to what these laws and rules are specifically that are requiring us to do this, because I think this all goes together. Because we talked a little bit about the state, and you're talking about physical therapy and different things. But, and I understand we can use OSPA as maybe a quick resource to find out some of them. But to help us all as a community advocate together as voices for having the funding follow the student if it is required in a classroom level to support the student here in our classroom. One example also, so Stabilization Crisis Unit and the entity, it evolved into another name, but where students come from care, state care, and they're funded and housed, and then they're released into the district and they say, hey, FYI, it's a policy or law that we have to let you know that we've now released a student into this neighborhood of this school. Does the funding just cut off and nothing follows the child to the district? Or is there a portion of monies that follow the student to support them as we learn their needs in our schools? The first one is the main thing, like more, if we could get more clarity on where we can all research those actual laws and rules more so that we can help continue to advocate for funding for those.
We'd be happy to send you summary information on the requirements under IDEA, which I think is what you're asking for. And then I think your second question was on group homes. And we do have significant service for students living in group homes in Salem-Keizer. There are a few communities across the state that are especially dense, and we are one of them. When a student arrives in our boundary areas in a group home, we get some notice, sometimes as little as a day. And we do not receive any additional funding for that student or his or her needs until and if that student remains in our enrollment for a full year, and then that additional student shows up in our average daily membership. But even at that point, I just want to emphasize that it is not necessarily inclusive of the sometimes significant services that young people living in group homes need to succeed and feel safe in a traditional school environment. And I think that Deputy Superintendent Neves and Cobb can say more about the complex educational needs that these young people sometimes have.
Well, I used to work for Stabilization Crisis Unit, and I had to go through 6 weeks of way more than MANT training just because of the safety around those. And actually that division was constantly having to show up at the Capitol and explain why they couldn't sustain funding, because when they closed Fairview, they decided it was inhumane to keep people shackled, so they opened residential homes scattered around Oregon and just put them in there without giving a heads up to the caretakers as to what the needs were. And I feel like that's the same scenario that we may be seeing with the district, no heads up. Well, that is the adults being physically beaten and all the way down the list. So I feel like if we're going to be reaching out to our state and the legislators and the governor to apply pressure in this area, I believe that that is a primary topic to be discussed. I think all parties are have an interest in this. I mean, I've spoken to our union representatives before because they've talked about it, and I know there was an opportunity last session to touch on this, but I think having these conversations open in the community, again, can help us. So yes, whatever you can share, willing to, I'm interested in hearing if you want to add.
I just want to clarify that we're sharing information about IDEA. I'm not sure what it is that you're requesting around group homes.
So just the need, I think that if we all understand the significance of the need of the focus of trying to get more of that money to follow the student to help with the schools. When the schools are like you said, oftentimes overnight, having to accommodate constantly, and that happens all throughout the year. So I just, again, was wondering about the process and the legalities of that. If we ever were able to come up, I think that coming up with a number that the school absorbs on average, an approximate number, when that happens on average might be too difficult. But I bet there is a guesstimated amount, because that number might be definitely helpful in the argument of, again, how much our school could be at a deficit each year with that addition. So if we're going to propose something to the legislators or our governor, I think that having a well-rounded stacked proposal would be great. So, I mean, I can spend time and explain this deeper, what I mean, definitely, if you would like.
Director Hudson, I think this is something that I would suggest probably at that point of research needs to be redirected back to the board, because it's a legislative agenda item more than it is a FY27 budget item. I do think as we confer with council and learn more about the edges of what's possible for this body to make to draft a letter along the lines of what Committee Member Jones mentioned. We can explore this a little bit, but I would like to respectfully request that we don't have the responsibility of undertaking group home research right now as part of the budget, as that is a substantial increase in staff time at a time of year where it's pretty tight right now.
So we don't keep any basic stats as a district when that happens. Say we have a drop of, say, a student with those needs in our district, of what the outcome was at the end of the year to help try to sustain, right? Is what you're...
We will have to manually work with literally every single school to collect information about individual students, group home status, and their needs, which is why I think it is probably more of a research agenda for a legislative agenda undertaken by the board than it is a budget research project.
I understand. I just wanted to be clear on the answer. Thank you.
Okay. I have a simple request. I hope, could we, all of us on the committee here, get just a reminder email about how to send questions in to all of you? I'm sure we all have it, but it would be useful if it just popped up in our inbox tonight or tomorrow. And with that, I would encourage everybody to think through, read every word, every number in the budget that you have before you. No, I just want to say I appreciate this dialogue. So if you have questions, please send them in. I really enjoy learning things and what we get back, but it also helps us all think about it as well. So with that in mind, a reminder that all Budget Committee members should have seen the calendar of meetings. The next meeting is Wednesday the 13th at 6 p.m. It is 8:29 on May 5th, and we are adjourned.
Great job.